30 minutes in, Logan. Let's talk about the game, shall we? We'll do this position by position, nice and quick, because, again, so much of the hay was already in the barn, but let's roll through it. We'll start with quarterback just quickly. Obviously, Daniels and Mariota don't play. The word on Marcus is that he could have, and they were just super careful because they're trying to get him 100% healthy. No need to go into the season with anything. I think Driscoll showed, his Jeff Driscollness last night. Yeah. I still tend to think they'll probably just keep two here. But, I think that he is a valuable guy to have around for sure if you need depth. And I will also quickly, before you give your thoughts, hat tip to Trace McSorley. He played a good game last night, and, what a tough situation for him to come into. But that's life when you're on the fringes of the NFL. And I really hope that Trace finds his way onto a practice squad somewhere and can stick around the league because the way he played last night, he deserves that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think Jeff Driscoll is going to be that guy, that veteran player that probably is on practice squad, and I think that'd be great for the organization to keep him around. And if there is an injury or you need him to come up for whatever reason, you can just pull him up for that handful of games. So I think he played well. I think you see some of his limitations and why he's kind of been, that practice squad third quarterback for a lot of teams over the course of his tenure. And again, that's not a knock on him. I think he's got some tremendous physical gifts. I mean, he looks the part, man. He's a big son of a gun.
Big hoss.
Yeah, and but like that dig that he throws to Bryson Tremaine, I don't know if he could have thrown that ball any harder. And it's that's where you see kind of the levels of quarterbacking. And I think, and again, he's a valuable asset. Let's keep him around, but I'm not sure he's warranted the 53. And that's not a knock on him. I think that's just a numbers thing from a quarterback position. Because if it's between him and Tyler Owens making the team for special teams value, I definitely want Tyler Owens. So,
although I do think Jeff Driscoll is the rare quarterback who could play special teams.
Dude, I think so too, man. He's big. I think he played tight end for. I think in I forget where it was, Arizona or Cincinnati. He played tight end for a year. So he's definitely got a very unique physical skill set
for sure. Sam Hartman, by the way, still hurt, but I would expect him to make the practice squad as well. Okay, running back, Jeremy McNichols, again, RB3, and I thought he had a pretty good night, and I think there was one run in particular that embodies something that they want, which is the physical toughness. When he gets out on the edge and he lowers his shoulder in the first half on that run, I'm like, that's your staple, just stamping shut. You making the team, sir. I think McNichols is on. Chris Rodriguez was up next, and I think had a couple of nice runs. Had a drop,
cut the ball well. I think outside of that one drop, but I think had a solid game. Game, let's say.
And then Wiley just continues to produce. So where are we at on the running back position?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see why Jeremy McNichols is maybe that third guy, the veteran savvy, the leadership, the toughness, all that kind of thing. But I think Michael Wiley, when you watch him run the ball, he's just got a great feel. And it's something that you can't really coach. He does run the ball hard. He catches the ball well. So that's definitely a guy from an upside play that you're like, how do we figure out a way to keep him around? And, maybe it's practice squad initially, but maybe after a couple of weeks, he's your third guy, or he's your first backup for Austin Eckler if he gets hurt, because his skill set leans that way a little bit. So I definitely think he's made a really solid case for himself on the roster over the course of the first 3 preseason games. I don't think it happens initially, but I definitely think it happens sometime this year.
Yeah, I think the beauty of the running back position / the curse of the running back position is, if you cut him initially, you're not concerned that he's going to get claimed.
Right.
Would other teams be interested in their practice squad? Absolutely. But is he going to get claimed? Someone to put a waiver wire thing on him? No. C-Rod on the wrong end of the numbers here?
Unfortunately, I think so. I mean, as much as I like Chris Rodriguez and he's my guy and I love how he plays the game, I don't think he's shown enough. And, he hasn't really got a ton of opportunities to show. But again, that's how the preseason goes, this is a tough time of year. And I'm not going to say he is cut, but I definitely get the vibe based on his usage and everything like that. There's other people that fit Cliff's vision a little bit more specifically.
Yeah.
So,
and Chris is a guy that's played on special teams. So if they keep multiple running backs on practice squad and want to call him up a week or two like that, I could see that happening for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Biggest thing of wide receiver. like the most declarative thing, I think, unless there's an injury that we don't know about. Jamison Crowder was inactive, and I know we put him on our 53, but dang, sure seems like Jamison Crowder's making the 53, Logan, because he didn't even suit up and play. They give a lot of opportunities in the punt return game to Kaz Allen, obviously. We'll talk about Kaz. I guess we can kind of talk about Kaz here as we're transitioning from running back to wide receiver, although he's going the other way. But Crowder seems to be a lock because he didn't play, and then we got a bunch of interesting stuff to talk about from the guys that did.
Yeah, so I think you got, Terry, Diami, Ozzie, and Luke didn't play, and then Crowder didn't play. So there's your 5 right there. And I think that's a pretty solid 5. I think they all bring something a little bit different. I think there's some growth potential there for McCaffrey, which is awesome. And that's exactly what you're looking for a third-round pick. And then it's who's going to take that 6th spot. And I don't know if anybody really put anything specifically or declarative on there. Obviously, the guy that I've been kind of touting is Bryson Tremaine. And I don't know if I've seen enough from him in game to warrant that. And again, we talked about the throw on the dig that Driscoll threw, which was a little bit hot and high, and the timing looks a little bit off. There's the out that McSorley throws where it looked a little bit late to me. And again, like that's a tough, like it's so funny. You're signaling all this stuff, and I understand like you're getting pressure off the left side there, so you signal it out. I think a slant would probably have been better versus the cornerback position, but again, that's a conversation for another day. Tinsley, I don't know if he's shown enough to kind of warrant anything, and then obviously Martavius Bryant, Rosemy Saint. I mean, Rosemy Saint is slowly coming along. Again, he had a good game today, but in practice has been a little bit quiet. So again, like this is really, to me, this is a Larry Izzo, like who do you want type of thing from a special team standpoint. Byron Pringle's another guy that I think has done a good job returning kicks. So really flip a coin here. I think the good thing about it is I think whoever they do not sign to the 53, they could probably easily get the practice squad at this point. So that includes Bryant, like despite him scoring a touchdown in this game. So
yeah, it is. It's really interesting because I feel like some of the guys that have made plays aren't teams guys, and that makes it difficult.
Harder.
Like Bryant last night, really, really good job of showing why he's intriguing, right? He draws 2 PIs. He's got the big slant on the touchdown where he just is a huge body, huge target, and shows the physicality where you're like, hell yeah, like let's get that guy on the football team. But you can't have a 6th receiver who doesn't play teams. Like it's just not functional. But on practice squad you can, and that way all of a sudden if, let's say Diami, strains a calf and is out 2 weeks, like, okay, let's call up Martavius Bryant off practice squad and have him play receiver, not teams. That's valuable. And that's kind of again, these new practice squad rules are so helpful in that way. But ultimately, on a week-in, week-out basis, the guys that you want to have in your team selection, if you will, like you need them to do the things that you need, and special teams in that spot is going to be huge. And so I don't know what they do with that 6th spot.
I don't know either.
Jack Saint makes a good play last night. I honestly think that I put Pringle in right now. One, that seems smart based off if he was the first guy out there. I mean, he's the one who caught the ball in the first possession that got called back. I would have loved to see a replay of that, by the way. I find a hard time to believe that he was out of bounds still when Driscoll threw that ball, but maybe he was.
No,
anyway,
it's first to touch when he's out of bounds.
Right, but if Driscoll's holding the football when he's out of bounds, he's allowed to come back in, and then he throws it. Like the ball has to be in the air.
No, like if the receivers, that's a really interesting way to word that. That's like something my dad would bring up from a rule standpoint. But if you step out of bounds, then you're the first to receive the football, even if the quarterback's holding it, it's a penalty. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're just out for the rest of the play?
Yeah.
Like he might as well just sit down?
Sit down. That's been a coaching point. If you step out of bounds, sit, like don't go back in the field because you don't want the quarterback to throw you the football because it's a loss of down. So it's like a really significant penalty. So like in like short red zone, like 5 yard and in on scramble drill, like defensive backs are coached to push you out of bounds. And so you'll see
because the way it's worded is the first to touch it. You can't be the first to touch it if someone else is currently holding the ball.
Correct. And so that's I've never heard that articulated that way before, but in practice, because we talk about this a lot, especially in that low red area, like do not get pushed out of bounds. Do not step out of bounds.
There's no reestablishing.
No reestablish. Right. It's not downing a punt, right? You can reestablish on a punt, but on a reception or
Well, because that's
you
why
can't even reestablish on a punt like that.
No, well, that's the thing that that's why I thought it was the way it was. Now we're totally sidetracked, but I think people are learning something, so it's fine. That or they're laughing at me. There's two groups of people. There are people that are learning something and people that are laughing at me. Because on a punt, the ball is in the air almost immediately. And so
that's
while it's in the air, if you go out and come back in, like, just don't be the one to touch it. If you went out of bounds, typically you wind up with 7 of your teammates around, be like, "Hey guys, I went out. Someone else want to touch the football?" Right. It's sitting on the ground. My least favorite penalty, probably in the entirety of the sport, when someone does that. So I always thought, like, yeah, no, the first one to touch it, you can't be touching it, or you can't be the first one if someone else is holding the ball while you're out of bounds. But now I know because you were coached otherwise. So someone should have coached me.
Absolutely. So that's why it's a frustrating rule for that, but I understand why it's that's interesting that you picked up on that though, like because the quarterback is holding the ball. Anyway, funny.
The point is that Byron Pringle, because he plays special teams and is a capable receiver, I think he's probably the 6th wide receiver. Okay, tight ends. This is really interesting because Cole Turner, again, like some tough looks. I don't know. I haven't had a chance to watch the L-22 and didn't get a feel for it as much as I'd like to live. Are those 2 drops on him? Like the first one's just a really tough play. Good play by the defender. The second one, it's like, hey man, like you gotta catch that. But also if he sat and Driscoll threw as if he was going to keep going, like that is a tough catch. And Driscoll's not, again, his touch isn't exactly receiver friendly.
Yeah.
He also picks up the holding penalty. Yeah. So that's not good. But he has the monster catch later in the game. He has some other nice blocks throughout. Like, where are we at on Cole Turner? And then I have another guy I want to ask you about.
Yeah, so the out I thought was just like a miscommunication, and you see that like throughout the preseason. Like it's hard for quarterbacks to have chemistry with all these guys, you know, because if you think about it, like even the dig to Bryson Tremaine, he's had more reps with Marcus Mariota than he's had with Jeff Driscoll in practice. You know, he probably had more reps with Jaden Daniels than he's had with Jeff Driscoll. So like getting that timing is really it can be challenging. And then on that zone read, like, I understand why Cole sat down, but I also understand why Jeff threw the ball out, you know? And so it's like, that's something you'd go back. You'd like to get that rep in practice and be like, hey, like, how you seeing that? What do you want me to do? And he's like, I'd prefer you run out. Then next time you know what to do. And then the seam ball, I don't know if that's anybody's fault. I think the DB is in good position. I think you probably want to think back shoulder there and let Cole work for you a little bit. But again, like that's a chemistry relationship thing between the quarterback and the receiver that comes with like a tremendous volume of reps. And that's why we talk about, you know, every offseason, like Terry and the chemistry with the quarterback. It's just hard to build because you need a lot of time on task. So I don't know. I have an interesting, if they wanted to keep Cole, I think he's played hard enough. He's played physical enough. He's played with enough urgency to warrant that. But I also could see the argument for them being like, hey, you're on practice squad. Like we have other positions we want to prioritize because we're worried about depth on the O-line or whatever. So I don't really have a good feel. I think in terms of play, like there's been a little bit of inconsistency catching the ball. But I think the other stuff has improved so dramatically that he looks like he could play on Sundays from a physical standpoint, which is something that he couldn't do, you know, prior. It's something that was in question prior to this year.
For sure. The other guy's Yankoff. And you mentioned this last week, like the way he's played on teams.
He's an animal.
And I feel like he's done some nice stuff as a tight end, like blocking. I think he had a catch last night as well, if I remember correctly. So like, are we looking at the whole backdoor Colson Yankoff roster spot potentially as tight end 4 here because of his special teams value?
That's the thing that I keep coming back to with him is like he's a special athlete and he does cover kicks. He covers kicks like a linebacker, but he plays on offense. Like he plays with this relentless abandon on teams. Like he had a great tackle covering a kick last night. And again, like the athletic upside, the rawness there, the growth potential as your 4th guy, I think maybe that's the move you want to go. A guy that, because you're looking at skill sets that could replace, you know, Zach Ertz potentially, right? And he's a guy that moves really well, has a good feel, you know, former quarterback. So I definitely think that is a possibility for sure. If you want that 4th guy to play teams, like who's played better special teams? Colson Yankoff. Like he's probably through the preseason, probably like a top 6 or 7 special teams guy for me. So he's close from a special teams standpoint. And I think he's developing as a tight end. If he had started in the game earlier, I'd say for sure. But again, like there just seems to be a little bit of indecision about like, you know, Cole seems to be ahead of him just from like the playtime stuff in the game.
Yeah. And Cole did a nice job on teams as well. It's funny that I remember that like, I don't know, like second week of camp, they were doing like a kind of corral the ball carrier drill
Yeah.
on teams on punt coverage, and they executed that drill. Like that drill came to life in the game last night.
Yeah.
And Cole was one of the guys who did a really nice job of, I'm not going to fly down the field and try to make the big hit and wind up missing and, flying past the punt returner. It was like, no, it was him and Walker, the linebacker, like perfectly corralled the punt returner. And you're like, that is excellent stuff. That's the kind of stuff that you pay attention to. And as a coach, you get really jazzed about of a guy executing the plan. So, I think the tight end is going to be really interesting. And I think both those guys could probably get to practice squad. So that is something to consider as well. We keep putting all these guys on practice squad. Someone's got to make 53. Someone's going to actually make it.
But I think that's like, this is why it's tough, is because like nobody was like, I deserve the 50. That's the thing about it, is you're hoping that someone says declaratively. I think we're going to get to it on linebacker here in a second, but there's nobody that's like, oh my God, this guy, he deserves it. We can't. Like Tyler Owens, like there's no doubt in my mind he's making it because of all the stuff he's done, right? Even Michael Walker, is that the linebacker's name?
Yeah.
Absolute maniac. Like he's gonna make it. That's what you're hoping.
KJ Henry's the other one that I had noted at that.
100%. Like those guys are going to make the team. Like there's no doubt in my mind, because they absolutely played like maniacs the entire preseason. And I think we were hoping that one of those receivers would do that. One of the running backs, I think, you could argue that Michael Wiley did that, and that's why we're in that conversation there. And then from a tight end standpoint, nobody said, like, if Cole catches 3 passes last night and blocks the way he did, he's on the roster. But again, there's a little bit of indecision. So I think that's why this is so tough, because nobody declaratively was like, I am your guy. I am the one you want. So that's why it's tough.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. O-line. One thing that caught our eye for sure, or caught my eye, and then I'm glad that some other people clarified this. Trent Scott was on the inactive list, and I was like, whoa, he's that on the roster? Right. And then apparently he's got an injury of some kind that he's picked up. So he had a big old brace on his leg. So that becomes interesting of like, what is that injury situation? And that, of course, sometimes we find out when guys get put on season-ending IR when the roster's announced that they got hurt in practice on Friday and nobody ever knew about it. So, that is one that initially I was like, okay, well, that certainly, I thought he was on, but I didn't know he was that on. Right. But anything in particular stand out last night along the offensive line?
Yeah, I think the main thing as you talk about guys like seizing opportunities is how Chris Paul has developed at offensive tackle.
I agree.
I think that's the one that really sticks out to me. Like there was a period of time where we were talking about him on the show, and it was like probably a 6-play sequence, and just how much better he's gotten in pass pro over the course of these 3 weeks since the preseason started has just been really impressive to me. And, he's always a guy that I thought was a little bit robotic in his pass set, but watching him take vertical sets, watching him jump, watching him use his length, the strength of his hands. And again, he's going against, the third pass rusher for New England. But I was like, man, like maybe that works in a game. Maybe that's the guy that you feel good about. And his tremendous power on the inside also is something that is really valuable too. So he's playing really good ball. I always get nervous when a guy comes in as a guard and then it's moved to a different position, because it's like, maybe we like these other guards in here, because if you wanted him to play guard, he would play guard, but I do think he's a guy, like when you just look at play, I don't know how he's not on the team. However, there's more than just play that's involved in this. There's the meeting room, there's all this stuff, but he's a guy that each game I've come away just impressed, like with his physicality, his technicality, and his improvement. Like
I feel like he's done well in practice too.
And so it's weird because he's playing tackle, and I don't think of him that way. So I'm always like, it's always like when they take the third string guard and they move him to center in like the 3rd week of preseason, you're like, ooh, he's probably not making the team because he's not playing guard anymore. They're moving him to a new spot. So it's weird, but I definitely think from a play standpoint, he deserves it. So
yeah. Speaking of Stromberg, dude was a 3rd-round pick last year, right?
Yeah, 3rd-round
pick.
Yikes,
bro.
And he might be a good practice squad candidate, but that's the other frustrating thing. I think the closest guy to kind of establishing like I deserve this swing guard spot is Good Jones, like just from a consistency and physicality standpoint. But nobody really was like, I am the guy.
Yeah, I don't think Dieter, he had a couple misses last night. Dude.
Yeah, so I think it's, in talking with other people that follow the team closely, no one in the building, obviously, it's just like maybe the depth's just not that great there. And maybe the depth's different if Chris Paul's there. Who knows? But it's that middle after the first 3 is a little bit uncertain, which is
a little
tough.
bit concernicus, Logan. A little bit concernicus.
Concernicus.
Okay. Concernicus. Okay. Defensively, a guy that we probably overthought of when we were doing our. Actually, let's start on the D line. We'll get to corner in a second. There was stuff that was happening at corner immediately, so for some reason, corner's at the top of my notepad, and it really belongs down further. D line. I think Big Phil and John Ridgway both were awesome last night. I don't think that's stunning analysis as they were making plays that everyone could see. But I think they've locked up their spots. I think KJ Henry, not only did he play well, I saw them line him up at 3 technique and some third down stuff. So you're like, oh, okay, we got some versatility. Look at that. And then you're talking about guys like Jamin, John Baptiste, Andre Jones. Where are we at on the final few defensive line spots?
Well, I think like you said, it's KJ Henry for sure. Like, I don't even know if that was like in question going in, but he definitely like kind of solidified himself. Like he's a good football player. Like he's just strong, he's smart, he's instinctive. Like that showed up a lot last year. I think the interesting conversation, I had it as Jamin kind of making that 5th spot, but I think Jean Baptiste, man, has come on strong in these last 2 games and played physically on teams. He's shown up in the run game. He's created some pressures. And I know they drafted him, 7th round pick. So it's not, neither here nor there. But, I was talking to Ben Standing and he was like, usually you if you bring someone in, that's the guy that makes it. If it's close. And I do think there's something there. And obviously James done a great job developing as a defensive lineman. But I do think Jean Baptiste has made a really compelling push here over these last 2 preseason games.
If they let Jamin go, do you think someone would claim him, whether as an edge or a linebacker, and be like, we liked him coming out. Like, we're just forget all this edge rusher stuff. Like, we're going to put him at linebacker because we think he can play there.
I think so. I think he played well enough last year to warrant a shot at that. You know what I mean? And like there are teams that are really thin at linebacker and they'd love to have an athletic guy like him doing that. So I think it'd be tough to get him to practice. I personally think, and maybe my read on him is so different than what the rest of the league is, but I do think he'd get a shot someplace.
Yeah, like I think they would love to. I think here they would love to bring him back and continue developing him as that project pass rusher. And a couple weeks in, let's see how it goes. But he's also, he started playing teams and doing stuff like that. So who knows? I think that's probably the toughest call. And who knows what they do with the numbers? Do they go with an uneven roster? I think that's a possibility too. Of like we had all these positions on offense. We're like, I don't know. They could probably get the guy to practice squad. Do they go with like 24, 23 on offense, knowing they can call guys up week over week and keep 11 defensive linemen? Like, I think that's possible. Linebacker, Walker, check. Yeah. Good job, dude. You're on the team. Dominique Hampton playing a lot of linebacker in this game as well. Not that I think his spot's at risk, just they're moving him around, trying to find a role for him. I thought that was interesting. And I think, we talked about the veterans coming in and guys that we assumed like, hey, that's a vet. They brought him in. Like, I think Pittman's in trouble.
But I don't know who else would take his spot though. That's the thing. Is like,
I think Walker. I think you go unless McGee's hurt.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I'm looking at there is like, I think McGee, we were talking about him being on the short-term IR situation, like, or whatever, that the 4-week IR thing. Yeah. I think if that's the case, I think Anthony Pittman makes it. If not, though, I agree with you. I think I think Walker's just, it's not an indictment of Pittman because he had a really good game against the Jets, but I think you just see the upside of a guy like Walker, the way he runs, the way he hits, the way he can cover. It's a little bit better than Pittman, who again is a good downhill kind of. If this was 2010, man, he'd be the guy because you run the ball a little bit more. But the game's changed a little bit, so.
For sure. All right. And then we get to corner. So Michael Davis is a guy that we left off our last 53. And we were talking before the show, and we're like, that was probably pretty dumb of us. Yeah. Because realistically, like if one of the 2 top guys, BSJ or Forbes, isn't out there, who's the next best outside corner? It's Michael Davis, even if he's a step down from those 2 guys. So he's inactive, meaning he's going to make it unless there's an injury that we don't know about, and that's why he's inactive. But anybody else on the corner side, because I think – Noah Igbenogany, who we both were like lock. He had a rough one last night. Had some good moments as well. Like showed some sure tackling at times. Yeah. Where like Chigozie Anuzium has a couple of plays where you need solid tackles in the 2-minute. Like let's keep that guy in bounds, and you don't execute the time score situation stuff. So I think that's an interesting one. And in some ways, I think putting Davis back on almost cleans up that position where, there's a couple guys, Tariq Castro-Fields, who was solid enough last night, Anusium, et cetera, that were fighting for a last spot that I think actually probably belonged to Michael Davis all along.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I think, Mike Sanderson, Benjamin St. Juice, Michael Davis, Emmanuel Forbes. I think Noah does make it because he's just physical. And then I think
Yeah.
Castro Fields probably. I think if he's been good the last couple of weeks, and I think he deserves that opportunity. So as much as I was in on Chig, I think Chig showed a little bit of his youth last night, and I think that there's nothing wrong with that. He's a young player, so put him on practice squad, let him develop. Like again, he's got the physical skill set, but I don't know if he's ready yet. But I think Castro Fields did a great job, so good for him. I think he probably gets that spot solidified.
I do wonder on the Drake May touchdown that got called back, though, who busted coverage that left Derek Forrest all alone trying to make a hero play, which he unfortunately did not. Fortunately, New England's offensive line doesn't know how to line up, so that's nice. Safety position's the last one. I kind of think all the relevant parties make it. Like Butler doesn't wind up playing last night, so he's clearly safe.
Yep.
Defoe, Tyler Owens is the first guy out there. So I think Tyler Owens is more than safe. Showed up on teams, showed up on defense, sure tackling. Like love that as a last line of defense.
Jeremy Reeves
and then,
too. I thought had a good game last night.
Reeves has been Jeremy Reeves, inconsistent defensively, incredible on special teams, but inconsistent in that he makes plays and then will miss a tackle here or there.
Sure.
And then Defoe is kind of the wild card there, and those are the last spots.
Yeah, I don't know about Defoe, but again, like when you're looking at numbers, what is it? It's Quan, Chin, Percy, Tyler Owens, Jeremy Reeves as 5, and so you keep a 6th, and I think that comes down to like what you do with Jamin on the defensive line, probably more than anything.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Cade York made his kicks.
Yeah.
We might actually put an actual kicker in the TBD line.
That ball flies off his leg, man. It flies off his leg.
Well, he was a 4th round pick for a reason.
Yeah.
He also got traded and cut for a reason, but that was why. The last guy, I want to circle back to Kaz Allen real quick, because I had opened up, Nikki and Sam's projection in the post, and they've got Kaz Allen on as a running back. I don't see it, to be honest. I think that the kickoff return stuff, like I get it. I get the idea of Kaz Allen. Yeah. I just don't like. He hasn't actually made any plays. He's been close on a couple, but he hasn't actually made any plays. And at some point, if you're going to be that gadget guy and that explosive person, like it just kind of is apparent that you are amongst the best athletes on earth, a different level. And I haven't seen that from him in 2 years, nevertheless, this year.
Yeah, I think that's something I come back to as well. And I think, Kaz has done a lot of really good things in practice and in games like you said, there hasn't been that kind of light bulb switch. And, like guys flash, like Tyler Owens flashes, right? And like you've been a part of preseasons where there's a dude in practice that just has a different gear. And I think Kaz, while being very athletic and fast, has not shown that to me just yet. And that doesn't mean he's not going to make it. I'm not saying that Nikki and Sam are wrong, but I think he's on the outside looking in right now, just because I don't know if he's better than a guy, some of the receivers that we talked about. So I think, again, put him in that same bucket with Bryson Tremaine and Mitchell Tinsley and Kaz Allen. Like, I think they're good football players. I don't know if their superpower is enough to warrant them being on the roster.
And I think one thing with him, too, that I worry about transitioning to the running back position is the vision. Like the NBC, you obviously couldn't see this because you were doing your job on the sideline, but NBC had kind of like an all-22 cam on kickoff returns, in part because they wanted to be able to see the entire return as the quarterback or as the kicker was kicking with the new rule. And so there's on one of the kickoff returns, you're just like, man, there seems like there's more space over there. And I don't know what the call is, whatever,
sure.
But it doesn't display like this a supernatural vision. He runs in the back of a dude. And by the way, that dude was Cole Turner, who probably could have had a better block. So there is that. Anything else to tack on to this now hour-long podcast, Logan?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, I think, again, like I have to say this every time because I was this guy. These bottom of the roster guys, this is a tough week, tough couple days. So our hearts go out to you. And, if you do make it, congratulations. If not, keep plugging away and hopefully something clicks for you soon. So
absolutely. And I will add this very shortly. Like, I think this is great for the league, the expanded roster spots, because Tarico or Chris Collinsworth last night on the broadcast was like, the dream's going to die for a lot of guys tomorrow. Yeah. And I was like, that's true, but it's a lot less guys than it used to, because by carrying 70 during the regular season, as opposed to 60. Like that's, do the math. 30 teams, 10 extra guys, like that's 300 extra jobs and 300 guys for whom
100%.
they will be a part of the NFL year round, as opposed to having to wait, work out, hope they get that call for a tryout, and then try again on a 90-man starting next spring. So I love that the NFL has done this. It's good for the game. It's good for the development of players. It's good for a lot of different stuff. That said, it's still tough. It's a rough 24 hours to find out if you're going to make a practice squad, all that kind of stuff. So best of luck to everybody, and good luck, Adam, on making these decisions. Because although you'd rather be the one with the power and the secured contract of whatever the heck Adam Peters is making as a general manager in the NFL, it's still a tough gig. All right. I will do a 53-man roster projection on the Hoffman Show. So if it is before 4 o'clock on Monday, you can tune in and you can hear it. And if it's after 4 o'clock on Monday and our show has already started, or I guess after 7 o'clock and our show has ended, then we have the Hoffman Show podcast, and you can go check it out that way. We'll put it up on YouTube as well, at the Team 980, at Craig Hoffman. Of course, you can check out this show at 1067 The Fan as well. And that's all the places you can find all the things. For Logan, who you can also watch on Command Center on the Commander's YouTube page, I'm Craig Hoffman, and we'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.